Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our Bible study. Except today we're having a bit of a conversation. Um, as you know, our goal is to show you that you can resurrect that time-honored tradition of sitting around reading the Bible and then talking about it. Something happened yesterday that I wanted to talk about with my dad. Um, it was actually really good, and I feel like we're bearing the gold, and not sharing the entire goal in what we do with you. So let me set some backdrop. Yesterday we recorded Genesis 16 and 17. Before we hit record, we had one thing happen where one of our members was told he needs to do something biblical. And then at the end, we actually had a very amazing biblical discussion on what we'd read and how it pertained to living out the godly life and how we treat others in the godly life. And I just want to apologize to you because in our goal to show you about the Bible study, we buried the gold and we hid the best parts from you. Since it was a private conversation, I'm not sure how much I could share about it, but I wanted to bring that up with Dad. Um, what are your thoughts on that? Am I way off base or?
No, I think it's good. Um, Kind of remind me where we went afterwards. We were talking about, um, remind me.
We were talking about the gentleman who behaved badly, and then the church deleted all of his stuff.
Yes,
But more to the point,
yes.
instead of rehashing that discussion piece by piece, I wanted to zoom out as I want to do. And that is why we actually have Bible studies, is to get into topics like that and hash them out and have those
Yeah.
conversations. And
Yeah, the whole thing with Christians who make major mistakes in their life.
yeah,
The response of the church is usually to blackball them, to ostracize them, to give them no recognition at all. And in Matthew 18, Jesus gives some guidelines for addressing people who have sinned against you.
hmm
And the first one is to go to them and talk to them and resolve the situation without it becoming a real public issue. And then, if that is not responded to involve the elders and then to bring it public before the church.
yeah,
And Jesus said, then treat them as tax collectors and sinners. And how did Jesus treat tax collectors and sinners? He was very gracious to open a way to restore them.
yep,
And I think that is a huge issue. The text that we read showed Abram as being a man of the covenant, and then he tries to fulfill the promises of that covenant through Hagar in an inappropriate way. And God's next conversation with him was not condemning, but involved promise and restoration and fulfillment of God's covenant with him. God did not throw him away and said, well, that does it, Abram. I'm going to get somebody else to do this job.
hmm
And I think we as Christians throw one another in trash cans way too soon and way too often.
yeah. And one of the things that strikes to me is that because there is pain in ending those relationships or having your Christian idol knocked off the pedestal, um, that a lot of people pendulum exactly the opposite way and they're not trusting anymore. That's kind of the camp I have found myself in most of my adult life. Uh,
Yes,
One of my favorites theological thinkers was Ravi Zacharias.
yes,
What happened to him? Um, but with that, when you brought up Matthew 18, something to think about there is also kind of like I did last week. He owes an apology to those he wronged,
hmm,
but also one of my concerns is you don't want that person being the face of your organization anymore when they have screwed up. There can be the rebuilding of relationship without publicly saying this is the greatest, this person speaks for us. But more important, what I want to talk to is not just the subject of, these building that relationship or redeeming that relationship, what I want to bring up is building the relationship in the first place. And this is why I'm so
Mhm.
thankful to you, Dad, for bringing the guys on, because I had no Bible study. I haven't been in a Bible study in a long time. And I'm like, I need a Bible study. Oh, and you know what'd be kind of interesting is to record it and share it with people. And Dad, you're open to that. Because we did that starting last March, I want to say thank you because we've had so many good conversations where we cover those topics.
Mhm.
And so, what I want to do is to the watcher or the listener out there, I want to tell you this is why Bible studies with others is so important, so that you can have those tough, thoughtful discussions where there will be disagreement, but also there will be relationship and how valuable that is.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And on that note, I think that the present kind of demeanor of Christian fellowship forces people into phony mode, in which we are all pretending to be sinless beings. Everything is fine. We
mhm,
have no struggles. We never argue with our wife. We never, do any of the things that would embarrass us in public. And I think
yeah,
we have forced Christian fellowship into a bit of a falsetto mode. And on the note of um, um, falling into sin, the Apostle John in First John points out that if we sin, the Lord is faithful and just to forgive our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
mhm,
And then that's the Apostle John, and then James, probably the brother of Jesus, writing in the book of James, ends the book this way. He says, "My brethren, if any among you strays from the truth, and one turns him back, let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins."
mhm.
And so, first of all, it's important to understand that this can be a brother um, who has sinned, and we turn them from the error of their way. It does not say to condemn them,
Right.
but to bring them back into a right relationship. And I just want to suggest something that many may not agree with, but I think that many times the greatest aspects of ministry lie beyond people's failures
Mhm.
and the catastrophes that they have brought upon themselves. And I think of David, I think of, Peter continually was making major mistakes.
Mhm.
He, in so many ways. And God can handle our error and he can use those to build us back better than ever.
Give me just a moment. I have to pair. Sorry about that.
All right, you can edit that out.
Yeah. Um, anyway, yeah, it's what has terrified me about church going is when like we just went through John. John chapter 2 is Jesus hanging out, sees a problem, fixes it. Chapter 3 is Jesus meets with somebody who is broken and heals him. In this case, Nicodemus. Chapter 3, same story, different person, different type of healing. Chapter 4 builds a relationship, sees what's wrong, heals that
Woman
person.
at the well. Mm-hmm.
And when I go to church, what I find it's the exact opposite. Here's the sermon, here's the condemnation, here's this. And maybe someday, if you're lucky, we'll have a relationship. And what I want to see, which is what I'm looking for in going to church, is the relationship first and then the conversation later. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
I was told by a pastor, well, maybe that church doesn't exist. And I'm like, you might be right. What does that say? If that doesn't,
Well, I think it does. You know,
I
the
think it does.
fellowship that I attend and Greg and Mark attend, we're very, very open. Our main purpose is to build relationships with people where they're at, and then to pray for them, encourage them, and help them in whatever rut they may be in. And all of us get in ruts.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're going to close it. If you're a follower of Christ, you do need fellowship. And that's coming from a guy who hates going to church. You do need to be in fellowship. If you're not in fellowship, you need to find where you can be in fellowship or make your own darn fellowship because you do need it. You do need somebody who can honestly tell you where you're wrong or to actually dive into the more difficult conversations. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for
Yeah.
your time. You have a great Wednesday and see you next Sunday.